Okay, so today's video is going to be about how you use the work. It's really important for newbies. I have posted documents before. I'm not sure that everybody has gotten them, but you do have a document that tells you, well, basically, there are the guidelines to the fib time and price work. Basically, this tells you where the analysis comes from, where I'm basically running a combination of Fibonacci price retracements, extensions, and projections, and I'm looking to identify high probability trade setups. Okay, so the ratios that I'm using is always going to be pretty much the same: 382, 50%, 618, and 786 as far as the retracements. As far as price extensions, I'm using 1272 and 1618. And then for the projections, I mostly use 100%, and that's for symmetry. And sometimes, if a move is beyond 100%, I will also use 1618. So this is just giving you the basics of what I'm doing to identify the trade setups. Okay. Now, there's also some timing work that you will see in the trading room during the day. I'll go over one of those examples when we start to look through some of the charts here and go over examples of trades and triggers. And then you can also watch this very short video on timing, because basically if the market's going straight down into timing, you look for a reversal back up. If the market is going straight up into timing, you look for a reversal back down. Okay, that's the video you should watch. So basically, I'm running all these price relationships to find your setups. The next most important thing would be, the three official trade setups. Okay, so the three setups are Fibonacci price clusters, which are essentially the minimum of three Fibonacci price relationships that come together within a relatively tight range to identify support or resistance. Symmetry setups. Now, a symmetry setup, one symmetry projection is considered a setup. Okay, so you don't need to have the others for that to be an official setup. You just need the one. And then there's also a two-step pattern setup. It's two-step pattern setups do not show up that often. It's basically a zigzag pattern that corrects a prior trend swing. Okay, and then when we have that two-step, so for example, if we have a two-step buy, we're looking for a low and a reversal back up. If you have a two-step sell, then you're going to look for a reversal back down. Okay, now if you want, there are some basic videos. I think they're just called Fib Time and Price on my YouTube channel. I know I've given out that link multiple times, but there's like an hour-long video going over each of these retracements, extensions, and projections. It also goes over some timing, so that's definitely worth watching if you have not already seen that. Okay, so anyway, those are the three setups though, and we'll see if we can find some examples. I know I'll find examples in symmetry setups and price clusters, but honestly I'm not sure if I have any two-step patterns on the board at this point. All right, now let's see what else besides the setups. Now, a lot of people will ask me if a single level is okay to trade against. Well, it's not going to be an official setup, which is going to be a higher probability setup, but there are definitely times like today where we had an extension, a major 1272 extension in the Nasdaq, and that's pretty much where we made the low today. Okay, so it's okay if you want to use something that's not an official setup, but if you're going to do that, I would probably focus on the extensions where moves tend to terminate, or 618. That's going to be one of the most powerful ratios, the 618. So those, I'd be less likely to do a trade against like a 382 or a 50%. You can if you want to use that for definition of risk, but you don't really have the edge. Okay. All right. Anyway, as far as what you do once you identify a setup, And you know, most of those I just have right in front of you, and I also post the other charts all day long. Once you have the setup, the way you make money, trade setup plus trigger equals entry, and then you manage it. Okay, so management just means, you know, defining your initial stop loss order, when you're going to trail it up to break even, and also you know, defining the exit targets. How are you going to exit? Are you just going to trail up a stop, or are you going to maybe exit partial positions at a 1272 target or something like that? Okay, that's a choice you can make for yourself. Now, if you have a trade setup and there's no trigger, then do not take the trade. Okay, so the trade setups are identified every single day, you know, both in the trading room and in the end of day update. Okay, so anyway, after you identify the setup, one of the things that you have to do is decide what time frame trigger are you going to use. Are you day trading or are you swing trading? So if you're day trading, it's pretty easy. You can use a 1 minute chart with the 834 EMA crossover. Okay, if you'd rather use a 2 or a 3 or a 5 or, you know, something like that, again, that's your choice. But I know that there are plenty of people that are making money during the day using a 1 minute chart for the day trade entries. Now, for a swing trade entry, you need to see a trigger either on a 15-minute chart or a 30-minute chart. But the way around this is you can take a day trade against the zone and then just don't keep it overnight unless it also triggers on the 15-minute chart or the 30-minute chart. Now, one of the other things that you have to remember is that, you know, many of the zones are violated every single day, and that's why we use triggers, because the triggers will help filter you out of, you know, quite a few of the zones that will never ever hold. So anyway, setup plus trigger equals trade entry, and then you manage it. That's the formula to make money with this work. I also have listed the moving averages that I use. The ones that I use on a daily chart are different than what I use on the intraday chart. So on the daily chart, I'm using a 200 simple and a 50 simple moving average. And then I also use a 5 EMA and a 13 EMA. Okay, so when the 5 is above the 13 EMA, that's bullish. If the 5 is below the 13, that's bearish. And, you know, these are used to help, you know, filter the best setups. Now, basically stocks that are below the 50 and 200 SMA and the 5 EMA is below the 13, those would be the best short candidates. Turn it around the other way. You know, if you're above the 50, above the 200, and then the 5 is above the 13, then those are going to be the better long candidates. Now, a lot of the charts will end up being mixed, but if you're thinking about, you know, what are the most important averages on the daily chart, I would focus on the 50 and where the 513 combo is. Is it in a buy mode or a sell mode? As far as the intraday charts, on all my intraday charts, you'll see an 8 EMA and a 34 EMA. Okay, now they're used for triggering entries, but it's also used to help determine, you know, what's the better side to trade on, and we will go over some of those examples. And then after that, if you haven't seen these yet, I have both the day trading plan set up. Okay, and I know I've posted this document before, but if you need me to post it again, I will. But this is the suggested day trading plan. So basically, you know, you're waiting to identify a setup, whether it's, you know, symmetry, a price cluster, or a two-step pattern. And then if the zone is tested and holds, what you then want to do is go down to a lower time frame chart. Okay, why lower? Because if you wait for the higher time frame chart, you're going to get in way too late. You want to get in to the trade as close as possible to where your definition of risk is. Okay, so don't forget that. Now, the setups that you can use for day trades, you know, pretty much any chart. You know, you can use daily support or resistance, 120-minute, 30-minute, 15-minute, 5-minute. But again, you know, if you're going to use like a lower time frame chart, like a 15-minute chart, then maybe you use, you know, a 1-minute chart for the trigger. All right. And then also, if you are trading the indexes, Thinkorswim and most of the other platforms will give you tick charts. So if you want, you can use a 377 tick chart for a quicker entry with the 834 EMA crossover. Or if you don't have access to tick charts, then just use a 1 minute chart, but instead you might want to use the 513 EMA combo, and that will be similar to what you'd get with the 377 on the tick chart. So that's another option. And then just the basics, for a day trade entry, on the sell side, the 8 EMA crosses below the 34 EMA and a prior swing low is taken out. You can either take that initial trigger when it occurs or the next pullback after the trigger. So just go through these plans, and let's see, as far as stops, so your initial stop, so initial stop for a buy setup would be to place it underneath the low made prior to the buy trigger firing off. The second option is to place the stop just below the low end of the price cluster. Okay, so either one of those is fine. Now, as far as stops and trailing stops, that's going to be, we'll go over some examples when I get to the charts. But typically, if you're not going to want to do your own symmetry work, then the best way to do it would be to trail a stop either under a prior swing low if you are long, or above a prior swing high if you are short. And then let's see, that's pretty much it. Now there's going to be other ways that you can trail stops. Honestly, I do not have the ATR set up, but that is sort of like symmetry, so you can use that also. As far as the swing trading plan, again, this is going to be pretty much the same exact thing, except that you're going to use a 15 or a 30-minute chart. Okay, but a lot of times when it finally triggers on a 15 or a 30, you're pretty far away from where the risk is defined. So one of the things that you can do in that case, if the risk is too high, is to wait for the pullback. Okay, and then if you get the pullback, maybe you use a 1 minute trigger to get in after that, and then you can place your stop underneath that low. Okay, but that's pretty much, that's pretty much it. Now, as far as the highest probability setups, again, on the daily chart, where the moving averages are all in agreement, those are going to be the best. Okay, so for a buy entry, prices above the 200 simple, above the 50 simple, and the 513 EMA combo is in a buy mode with the 5 above the 13. Just reverse it for a sell, and we actually have some of these, on the sell side where you have all of the moving averages on the right side. Those will be the better ones to look at. And also, if you're talking about a 30-minute chart, if the 834 is in a sell mode, then you're going to want to focus on the sell side. Okay? I mean, it doesn't mean that you can't take a counter trend trade, but you need to know that it is counter trend, which means that you have to be super nimble and you have to exit if it doesn't do what you need it to do. So with all that being said, are there any questions on that? I can actually give you the document. Let's see. I think I can post it. Yeah. Yep, there it is. So that has all that information. So are there any questions? No, breaking through a cluster is not a setup. The cluster would have been a setup, but it didn't trigger. The setup, again, either 3 price relationships or symmetry or a 2-step pattern that also has a minimum of 3 price relationships. Okay, well, are you talking about, so for the trigger time frame? So we can go over a couple of examples from today. Okay, because there were plenty of setups here. Let me just find my trigger chart here. Okay. Okay, so do you see this, the zone here in Apple? 154.06 to 155.33. So you knew we had support. What else did we have in Apple? Timing for a low. Okay, we had the histogram timing that gave us the 22nd through the 24th. You had a couple outright cycles on the 26th. So where is your trigger? So here. So if you're, looking at a day trade decision, so here's where it tested the support. So where's the trigger? Well, here's the moving average crossover. And then look to the left and see if it also took out a prior swing high. And if it did, then that's, a complete trigger. And what's kind of funny about that too, though, is we also have this squeeze trigger that ended up firing off pretty much at the same time. I don't know if any of you use the squeeze trigger. It's not my thing, but that's something you can look at. So once this occurred, you could have been a buyer, and your stop would have been either underneath that support I just showed you or underneath this low. Your choice. Either one of those is fine. Okay, so that's one of the setups that we had this morning. Okay, what else? So let's see about what will be a good example. Amazon was a little bit too far away. Okay, so what about Facebook? Okay, that's a good question. For triggers, can you break above the prior swing high before you get to the crossover? Yes, absolutely. It doesn't matter what order it comes in. It just, ideally, you get both. But if you're only going to use one thing because you can't figure out what is the prior swing high or low I'm supposed to use, then just use the crossover. But I like to see the pattern shift. Do I consider what correction complete? I have no idea if this is a good low or not. All I know is that we had time and price support, and you rallied like over 690 points in Nasdaq. We'll go over those examples too. But so there was a, let me make sure I had it in here. Facebook. Okay, yeah. So Facebook weekly chart, 288.73 was what? A symmetry setup. So there was your setup. Okay, so then where's your trigger? Well, again, if you're looking at it for a day trade, all right, so here's the 834 EMA crossover. Here you took out a prior swing high. So right around that 291 area, that was your trigger for a day trade. Your initial stop would have been either underneath here or underneath the low end of the zone. Yeah, I'm not going to go over how I do the analysis right now, because there's more people that, come into the room and they look at the charts and freeze, because they're like, what the hell am I supposed to do with this? So that's what I'm trying to get through today. So here, 288.73, again, this would have been the trigger on a 1-minute chart. But now we can also see, did it also trigger? Well, it would have triggered on a 5-minute chart also. Did it trigger for a, yep, actually the 15-minute chart, which is the aggressive swing trade trigger, also triggered. So could you keep it overnight? Yeah, if you're okay with using the aggressive swing trade trigger. Has it triggered yet on a 30-minute? No. Okay. So that was another setup, and that was another nice rally. So let's see what else we had. See anything else that stood out? Not really. Yeah, we'll look at the Tesla. Okay, so as far as Tesla is concerned, I told you that we had support at that 850.63 area. Now this was not a perfect hit, but I just look at it visually. Is it close enough to consider a trade against? Absolutely. The actual low was made at 851.47. Okay, so I believe the symmetry just comes from this prior high to low swing projected from here. And what else do we have? Timing. Okay, if you watch the end of day videos, then you know when I have timing. So that's something you definitely want to do. Otherwise, you will not be fully prepared for the next trading day. And let's see. So in this case, let's just take a look at that one. So it tested and held. Well, let's look at a trigger. Okay, so here's a prior swing high. Here's the crossover. Okay, so once that occurred, you can take the trade, place your stop either underneath here or underneath the 850.63. Okay, so that's another setup. There were multiple setups today. All right, let's see what else we have. Now, what happened with the resistance that I ran, I already posted the end of day video and stuff, but I'm going to have to recalculate all of these resistance levels, because what happens if you shut down the program, because I did this on the last bar, it disappears and I have to recalculate everything. So that, I'll have that done before tomorrow. All right, anyway, beyond that, what else did we have? Nothing there. We did have actually a nice decision in crude oil. Okay, so this included symmetry, 81.77 to 81.88. So there was a 1272 extension and a 100% projection. 81.90 was the actual low. That's within 2 cents. That is close enough. And let me just check this. 84.20. Yeah, so that was $2.30 as far as a rally. And now we do have to watch for possible failure on the way up, because, you know, this new pattern is bearish. And then we don't know if it's going to be a two-step that takes you to a new high or a new sell pattern. So that's why we have to watch and see if it triggers against this resistance for a possible short. Okay, but let's take a look at that trigger. Okay, so CL. All right, so that was made at what, 81.88, yeah. All right, so here, looks like the crossover was here, but you didn't take out a prior swing high until here. Okay, but once that occurred, your definition of risk, either underneath this low or underneath 81.77. Okay, so that's another setup that triggered today. All right, and let's see. I'll take other questions after I'm finished with this. I want to get through the, trades and triggers, and then see if you guys have any issues with that. All right, I think we're going to go to, oh yeah, we did have a nice setup in Bitcoin via the weekly chart. Okay, so if you measured this prior high to low and projected from here, that's where we put in the low. Okay, so was it perfect? Probably not. 32.903, actual low 32.933. Okay, but this was a major swing. and that symmetry projection. So did you see a trigger? Okay, so this is just an example of the 1 minute chart with the 834. Okay, here's the crossover. Actually, it's a little hard to see the prior swing high. I mean, there might be one that's lower, but otherwise this is a prior swing high. So it triggered, and from that low, actually, let's see, how much of a move was that? $46.39 from the low to the high. Now, I don't expect you to get the exact low or the exact high when you exit, but if you get something in the middle, then you should be pretty happy about that. Now, if you wanted to use a different chart, like a 5 minute chart, again, this shows up also. So here, that's where we tested and held the support. Here is the 834 EMA crossover. Here it took out a prior swing high. Okay, so the setup was the buy zone, the symmetry support. This was the trigger. All right, let's move away from this, and then let's focus back on the indexes. Okay, so I did post this chart today, and I also went over this in the update. But you know, bottom line, you always look for symmetry because a lot of times these swings repeat themselves. So 594.33 versus 596. Okay, not perfect, but close enough to know to watch for support. Where did our triggers come in? Well, let's take a look. I mean, if you're using a 1 minute chart, and again, if you want to be a little bit more aggressive with the one, you can change this to a 513 EMA crossover if you want it to trigger a little bit closer to where your definition of risk is. Again, your choice. I know some of you use options, some of you are trading outright futures. But bottom line, on the 1 minute chart, here's the crossover. Look to the left, see if it took out a prior swing high. Once both of those things occurred, that was your entry, and your stop could be right underneath this low or underneath the support. Okay, so that's S&P. And let's see. Okay, and everybody knows that, you know, with the timing, we're looking for reversals. So if the market is going straight down into it, like, you know, we talked about, you look for a potential reversal back up. So when you have that information, it may not reverse, but it does often enough. I mean, it's probably about 60% when it triggers, but it's always worth watching. In this case, obviously, it did turn. I mean, we had a pretty dramatic reversal that reversed not only on the daily work, but also on the intraday timing. Okay, so I ran the intraday timing from this last high for the next possible low, and it identifies the time windows or time periods to watch for a possible reversal. So not only did we have the daily cycles, we also had the intraday. And we had symmetry support. Okay, 42.14 and a quarter. Let's see, the actual low. 42.12 and 3/4. Okay, again, you know, I look at it visually, and if it's not really way through, that counts. I try not to be as much of a perfectionist as I typically am because I am a Virgo. We're definitely very analytical and like to be perfect, and I know that's not possible. So anyway, so that's you know, that's what we had in the S&P today. Now what about Nasdaq? So here's where, you know, you may want to consider, well, can I use a single level? Okay, because this does also define risk, and many moves tend to terminate at extensions of prior swings. This is a major extension of that swing. So if you were okay with it. I mean, how much of a rally was that? 807 points? Okay, that's off of the Nasdaq weekly. Yeah, pretty much the same thing on the daily. Like I said, the charts that I've posted for the update do have the resistance on it. But since I had shut my charts down, it's I'm going to have to do that all over again. All right, so that was Nasdaq. And then what about IWM? Okay, I showed you this high to low, 35.70. Projected from here, gave us 191.43. Okay, it wasn't a perfect hit, but it was close enough. 35.70 versus 35.64. That was a setup. And let's look at the trigger. Hang on, I'm not looking at questions just yet. I just want to get done with these few more examples. So IWM. Okay, so on a 1 minute chart. All right, so here's the, oh, and also you probably only want to focus on 2 to 3 different markets. Because if you try to do, or watch as many of the charts that I do, you're going to get lost. So just focus on a few and watch for your signals. But here's where we tested support in IWM. This is on a 1 minute chart. Here's the 834 EMA crossover. Here's where you took out a prior swing high. So it probably got triggered around like 192.30 or something. And let's see how much of a rally that was. Well, from that low, 11 and 16. Okay, I mean, that was a very healthy rally. Did you sit through any issues there? It never went through the support. All right, that's probably enough to go over. So now I'll take questions, but please don't give me, don't private message me. If you have something you want to ask me later, just email me. The EMAs, 834 EMAs on most of the charts, unless you're going for a more aggressive entry trigger, then you can use the 513. But you need to check the chart first and make sure that there aren't too many false triggers if you're going to use a 513. Okay, yeah, going over stops would be a good idea. Let's see. All right, so let's say all right, so yeah, I don't want to use the 30-minute chart. I'm going to want to use like a shorter term chart. So let's say you took a buy against this support in IWM. Maybe use something like a 5-minute chart. I mean, unless, if you're shorter term oriented, you're going to use something shorter term. So let's see what that looks like. Okay, so, once it starts moving in your favor, where are the prior swing lows? I mean, if you bought it down around here, because you would have gotten in closer off of the 1 minute chart, then as it moves up, well, first let's see, after it made this low and then started trading back up, you could put the stop under here. You could also then trail it up to under here. You can also then put it under here. I mean, if you want to be really short-term oriented, use a 1 minute chart. I know some of you are not short-term oriented, so you have to kind of fit this to how you want to trade it. Let's see what else. And then the other thing, you can just use a price stop and say, hey, how much am I willing to risk? And then just trail it up as you go. All right, now let me see what other questions there are. Where are you talking about a two-step in Facebook? What time frame are you talking about? I don't see one. Yeah, let's see. So if you're using a 10-minute chart as the trigger, you might even be able to use the same 10-minute chart. Again, like I said, you have to decide how much are you willing to, sit through to try and stay in for higher prices. And also know that, when I do the night charts, it's only a courtesy. It's not part of the service. I will do them when I'm in town, but when I'm out of town or in a hotel, those charts will not be up. Not until I get help, anyway. Okay, so for the NQs, how many time windows should you have tried to use to confirm that low? Yeah, I've emailed the trading plans multiple times, and also on that document, it has the link for them. But let me see. You know what? I'll just resend them to everybody after I'm done here. I don't know what you mean by how many time windows. I mean, if it held a zone and it triggered an entry, that's all you need to know. So, not really sure. Okay, after you place a trade, you're only concerned with the stops. I'm going to be concerned with what could get in the way on the way up, because the resistance on the flip side will help you manage the trade. So say, for example, like this chart that I have in front of you, let's say you took a counter trend buy in Facebook, okay? And then you knew you were coming up into resistance right here. That would give you reason to trail up a stop, and you'd probably have to go to like a 5-minute chart or something like that in this case. But the most important piece of information is going to be your setup, because you have your definition of risk, and then all you need to do, even if you don't know what the resistance is on the way up, is to trail up a stop. I look at the resistance wherever it shows up. Okay, so I'm mostly updating charts on, mostly dailies and 30-minute charts. So there are times where I'm going to have, resistance showing up on the 30-minute chart, and other times where I'll have it showing up on the daily chart. So wherever it shows up, watch it. I mean, since I typically will do both time frames. All right, let's see. Did I miss any other questions? Yeah, so remember in the Nasdaq, let's see. You knew it was counter trend, but you knew we had timing on a 120-minute chart. And you can see that on this time frame chart, it went from, a bearish pattern of lower lows and lower highs to took out a prior swing high, then went to higher highs and higher lows. But it was counter to, all the higher time frame charts. But that was a gorgeous rally. That's all you needed. A trigger on a 1-minute chart to take a trade. You don't have to try and line everything up on different time frames. Just choose your setup and choose what triggers you're going to use. I have no idea about the algorithms. I just know that technically this market is not good. How do I know that? Because it's a bearish pattern of lower lows and lower highs, and you are below the 200, you're below the 50, the 5 and 13 are in a sell mode. You know, when it was the other way around, you know, when you're above the 200 and above the 50 and the 5 and 13 were in a buy mode, you know, then it was much better to look for the buy side. Right now, buy side's pretty much counter trend on almost everything except something like crude. And that's why, you know, in the video, if you watch the video, which you should, I'm talking about some sell setups. Why? Because the moving averages support the sell side. It may not trigger against the resistance, but just know that it's there just in case. As far as how far back I go to find the resistance, it really depends on the chart. So, for example, okay, this is a daily chart in Amazon. Where am I going to find the resistance? Well, I can find some from this swing, but I can find some from here as far as retracements, and here, and here. But then I'm also going to run projections like this low to high, that low to high, that low to high, that low to high, and project them all from the low. So in this case, you know, I'm trying to use the most recent, you know, campaign swing, basically. Yeah, I think this is more than algorithms. It's people saying, get me the hell out. I mean, this has been a long time coming. You know, how long has this market been in a buy mode? Many, many, many years. I mean, since this last low, you've barely had a correction. This is the first time you're getting a way larger correction than these within the uptrend. And this market is still vulnerable. So do I know if this is a major low? No. But what I knew is that we had time and price, and it triggered an entry, and if you took that trade, you would have made money. So you don't have to know exactly where the market's going to go to make money. You just have to trade the setups with triggers and use stops. I still talk to people that don't use stops. I don't get it. Or at least options. You know, the price of the option could be your definition of risk. But you could still take a big hit there if you're in some of those crazy stocks. You know, I told you that it's in a sell mode, and that if the 30-minute chart is in a sell mode, that you should not be long. So you should not be long. Unless you're using the aggressive swing trade trigger, because that's the only one that fired off in Tesla. 30-minute chart didn't. I mean, what happens if we go like this, fail here, and then make new lows? So for me, you know, the 30-minute chart is better. But the 15-minute chart, if you want a more aggressive entry, then you can be long. But then where should your stop be? It's got to be either underneath here or underneath here. Look at where this turned. Okay, so here's the crossover to the downside. It hasn't turned back up since then. I mean, these are not always going to be, you know, perfect as far as entries and exits, but they work well enough that if you follow the rules and actually, you know, you're going to want to focus on more of the trend trade setups, you should make money. Okay. As far as why I show those certain, I mean, I always did the S&P. I've always specialized in the S&P. Nasdaq, you know, I want to do the major, you know, the major indexes. I'm doing IWM instead of RTY. I'm not going to do all futures. And then I just chose those. Apple, Amazon. We used to use Facebook. Instead, we're using NVIDIA. And what else? I know I'm missing one. Oh, Tesla. Okay. Do you guys have a better idea of what you're looking for as far as the setups now? I mean, like I said, if you want to trade a single level, that's your choice. Now, I don't know if this is going to be a major low. I think we could end up, having another failure. And why do I have to look for that? Well, this is Apple chart, but because the charts that we're looking at pretty much below the 50 and the 5 and 13 are in a sell mode. It's one thing when the market was giving us higher highs and higher lows, but we have shifted. So you have to be prepared for a possible failure. I am not convinced that a low is in place. The end of day videos are posted on both the live site, and they're also posted on box.com. But if you go to box.com, you have to download them and then play it. I mean, no, Shopify was already posted. You have to go look on box.com. So since I don't have all the charts from this morning on there now, because I transferred them over, so you'll see this is what I had during the day. It's right here. Okay, if you want to find those charts, you've got to go to box.com. I did start to post some on the site, but I don't kind of like that interface very much. I don't think you need an account for box.com, but if you do, you can have a free account. You don't have to pay them anything. And then you can also put it on your phone too. Tesla did not cross on a 30-minute chart with the 834. The 8's down here. The 34 is up here. I told you it only did it on a 15-minute chart or the more aggressive swing trade trigger. Well, as far as timing is concerned, I mean, that's a whole nother thing. But as far as timing, here, I'll show you what I've done on the indexes, because there's two different ways I do timing. Okay, one of them is using calendar day projections. So here I measure from this last high for the next possible low and just run a report with the histogram. You see, and it showed with the histogram that the timing 23rd, 24th, pretty much. Well, or 22nd would have been included, but that was on the weekend. So it basically takes all of the highs and lows that I've marked. It runs all timing relationships for me and then just spits it out and puts it on the bottom of the chart. Now the other ones I have to do by hand, which is why this work is very tedious. No, don't save it. Okay. And for that, I'm just using, and you have these tools on TOS if you wanted to try it. I measure prior highs to highs and project forward, prior lows to lows and project forward. I do lows to highs. I do highs to lows when it's appropriate. I compare swings in the same direction. but it's just doing it on the time axis instead of the price axis. So here, for example, I did what? This low to this high, 618 in time, because basically the program measures the time, multiplies it by the ratios, and then projects forward. So this is the low to high, 618 in time, 24th, today. This is another one, a low to low cycle, 618, today. Another one, low to low cycle. You know, you'd have to count the days in between this, multiply it by the ratios, and project forward. Obviously, the computer does a nice job on it. And literally, I used to do this by hand on paper charts with a calculator. And I'm not kidding. I literally did that because I started in, let's see, well, in 78, I moved to Chicago. And then I didn't learn this until after the crash of 87. I don't do the Qs. I mean, the only reason why I do extra charts like S&P cash versus S&P futures is because S&P futures has garbage data. Look at this. I can't work with this. This is garbage. But if you're looking at S&P cash, that fills in the blanks. It has all this back data. But I don't do QQQ. You can trade QQQ against my Nasdaq work if you want, though. No, Dynamic Trader costs about $1,000, and it's costing me about $800 a month to pay for data. But if you want to do, you know, you really have to want to do what I do because it's one of the best programs for it. There might be something coming in the future, but it's not available yet. Okay, let's see. The fact that the timing for a daily... I think that... Okay, Helen, the fact that there's both the daily timing and the intraday timing makes me think that we'll at least get a couple of days of rally. You know, you still have to be prepared for that possible failure because of the, you know, the fact that we are looking at lower lows and lower highs, and also where the moving averages are at. Actually, let me just redo this work here on, well, okay, now it should save. So if I run this low to high, that we are through. Like the areas of resistance, especially the stuff that is around Symmetry or 618, you definitely want to watch. Let's see, I think I did that one. Oh, no, I didn't. Yeah, I'll have to finish the rest of this. But, you know, these areas or these projections, you have to watch very carefully for possible failure. I don't, you know, anything is possible, but for me to guess, that I don't know. But I think I did hear someone else talking about that there should be another swing down via Elliott wave. I don't know because I know very little about Elliott wave. You know, I know the basics, but when I try and look at that and put it on the chart, there's no way. And it's too confusing for me because you have to keep on changing the counts. I can't do that. I can't work like that. So with the stuff that we do here, you know, I have some very clear levels and all that good stuff. So you know where your stops are, you know where your potential targets are. And also, you know, usually get you support and resistance to help you manage a trade. Oh, okay. Yeah, you know, Thinkorswim has it. It's just, it has all the tools. It's just very sloppy. I mean, like I said, it's quite possible because, you know, we're just doing the opposite of what we were looking at. So if you remember, for quite some time, anytime that you had price, this is the S&P cash, above the 200, above the 50, and the 5 and 13 was also in a buy mode, yeah, it was a pretty easy trade. But one of the other things that you can watch very carefully is the 513 on a lot of these. So for example, ideally you want to trade on the side of the 513. I mean, that's going to be the higher probability. So notice that, for the most part, a lot of this time period, you had it on the right side. You had it on the right side. Had it on the right side. Here you don't. So before we were buying pullbacks. Now we're going to be looking at selling pullbacks. Yeah, if you have any other questions, just email me, cb1618@aol.com, because I think I want to wrap this up. I do have another meeting that's coming up. But does that help as far as setup plus trigger equals trade entry and then you manage it? Okay, good. Because I'm also going to go ahead and just post this on YouTube. So hope it helps. Like I said, if you have any questions, please email me. And I will see you tomorrow.